Hi, fifth graders. How are you doing? Are you ready to read about Ben and how well he is adjusting to his life in his new town and school? Our learning targets today will be to determine how characters in a story respond to challenges. We will do this by identifying challenges in the characters' traits. We will especially note how Mrs. Tibbets and Ben respond to the challenges. By doing all of this, we will also be able to continue determining the theme of the story. Let's complete our character motivation chart as we review chapter 8 from last time. In chapter 8, we will focus on Ben and Mrs. Tibbets and how they responded to challenges. The setting was a lean-to by Mrs. Tibbets' garage. The first major event was when Ben opened the cage door. Ben's curiosity was very difficult for him to resist, so he opened the door. The second major event was when the snake escaped. How did Ben react to the snake escaping? Did he try to catch it? Why or why not? Then Ben tried to close the door. What caused Ben to realize he should close the door? And then Ben speaks with Mrs. Tibbets. I remember Mrs. Tibbets was friendly, but Ben didn't want to stay around and talk. Why do you think that is? I agree. He was afraid Mrs. Tibbets would find out he had messed with the cage and let the snake out. It was an accident, but he still knew what he had done was wrong. Let's continue with the story. We're going to read chapter 9, and don't forget, good readers ask questions as they read. Excuse me. Chapter 9. The next day in class, Ben can barely look up at Mrs. Tibbets. He slumps down in his seat, thinking about the snakes. He knows that snakes don't ordinarily strike people, at least if people leave them alone. But he can't help picturing them gliding out of the cage, lurking in the garden, ready to strike out if someone passes by. Someone like Mrs. Tibbets. He sits up straight and tries to concentrate on the class discussion, but he can't get those two triangular heads out of his mind. When Ben gets home, he has a snack, then goes to his room and shuts the door. He doesn't know what else to do but work on his homework. He stares at his geography assignment. An outline of the report is due tomorrow, but Ben hasn't been able to get started on it. Now it's the last thing he wants to do. The desert seems a million miles away. So what worries Ben about the snakes being loose? What is he most worried about? And why has Ben struggling with doing his assignment? The phone rings. Ben runs into the hall and answers it. Ben, this is Mrs. Tibbets. Ben is too stunned to speak. He stares at the wall. Ben? Oh, right. Hi. I need to ask you something. Okay. Ben's heart is racing. When you came by yesterday afternoon, did you notice anything about the cage behind my garage? What? Ben is fighting for time. The cage behind my garage, the one under the lean-to. Now Ben's mind is racing too. He knows he should confess, but he just can't. No, I didn't notice anything. Well, someone's apparently opened the cage and then fastened it shut again. She stops talking for a moment, leaving space for him to say something if he wants to. Ben, the snakes in that cage are dangerous. Somehow they got out. Wow. Ben's voice is barely above a whisper. Oh, I need to repeat that. Wow. Ben's voice is barely above a whisper. He feels terrible about the lie, but he can't bring himself to explain to her what What kind of snakes were they? He asks. Rattlesnakes, timber rattlers. That's why I asked you to stay away from them. Rattlesnakes? Ben tries to sound surprised. Yes, I thought maybe you were looking at them when you were here. So why do you think Ben is not telling Mrs. Tibbets the truth? Do you think he is making a good choice? Why or why not? No, says Ben. Oh, this is horrible. I shouldn't have kept them. Where did you get them? Ben tries to sound like he's just interested and doesn't know anything about them. They're very rare around here, Mrs. Tibbets says. My husband was licensed to capture and move snakes that had lost their habitat. He was going to transfer those rattlers, and then She pauses for a minute, and Ben knows she's thinking about her husband dying. She takes a breath and goes on. I should have done something with them. Now who knows what happened? Maybe there was a hole in the cage. They got out somehow. Maybe someone stole them, Ben says. It's hard to imagine. No one knew they were there. Or oh my, oh, what have I done? I've added some words there in my reading, didn't I? Did it change the meaning? So here's a question. Are you asking yourself questions? My question for this text would be, why did she keep them? And was it because they reminded her of her husband? You didn't do anything, Ben says. Yes, I did. I kept them and I shouldn't have. Will they be all right? I don't know. The teacher's voice sounds so sad that Ben's throat tightens. It's too early in the year for them to be out, and they usually can't adapt to a new habitat. This is all my fault. Maybe they'll be okay, Ben says, trying to cheer her up and himself. Thanks. Then before Ben can hang up, she asks, is your mother there? So why do you think Mrs. Tibbets is so sad? What text evidence do you have to support your answer? Wonder what she's going to ask Ben's mother. Ben freezes. Why does she want my mom? Yeah, he stammers. May I speak with her? Ben feels sick. Sure, just a minute. He calls his mom. Who is it? She asks. It's Mrs. Tibbets. He hands her the phone and walks away. But as soon as he's around the corner, he stops to listen. Have you ever done that? Let's go on. His mother says hello and then falls silent. She's quiet for a long time. He sticks his head around the corner and sees her just standing there with the phone to her ear. Are you sure? She says. Then after a pause, she talks for a while, saying how much Ben has always liked the outdoors and wild things, and how she appreciates Mrs. Tibbets' concern. She hangs up and sees Ben watching. So I'm going to pause right here for just a minute. What do you think Mrs. Tibbets and Ben's mom were talking about, and why do you think that? Let's keep reading. I wish you'd told us about those snakes, she says. Ben nods. If his mom asks him whether he let them out, he knows he'll have to tell her the truth. Well, she says, I'm relieved you didn't have anything to do with it. She sounded very upset. His mom heads back to the kitchen. Ben stands there. He missed his chance to let the truth come out. Sinking deeper and deeper into a hole, he feels worse than ever. He goes back to his desk and stares at the blank wall. The desert is 2 million miles away. When he closes his eyes, he sees the snakes. He wonders where they are tonight. Did you notice I underlined a phrase? It says, sinking deeper and deeper into a hole. What does that phrase mean? Is Ben actually down in a hole? It is figurative language. It's an idiom. It is a phrase that should not be taken literally, but provides Ben's feeling, how he feels. There was some more figurative language on this page. Do you know which one it is? Find it? Write it down. Let's go on. Ben does his best to avoid Mrs. Tibbets in school that week and the next. When he's in her class, he does his work but doesn't raise his hand. Twice she asks him after class if he's managed to catch a peeper or if he wants to come check on the vernal pool again. Both times he shakes his head and hurries out of the room. It's not like he's lost interest in the toads, though. He spends a lot of time in the woods behind his house. His parents must notice because one day his father comes home with a new pair of waders. "This is to save your sneakers," he says. I'm going to stop for a minute and I'm going to ask, what evidence from the text tells you how Ben chose to respond to the fact that he lied to Mrs. Tibbets? Let's keep reading. They fit him better than the ones that he used at Mrs. Tibbets' house, and he likes the feeling of being waterproof. Using the net Mrs. Tibbets had given him, Ben snares a few American toads, but he still doesn't manage to catch another peeper. He decides to keep one of the toads, and with the money he's saved, he buys a terrarium from the pet store. After fixing it up with some mud and a couple of plants, Ben settles the toad in its new habitat. Have a new setting. The following Thursday, after Ben is sitting at his desk at home trying to get started on his geography project, his mom has laid down the law: no more wandering in the woods until he's made progress on his report. His sister is always playing with Rory, Ryan's sister. The house is quiet. He has no excuse for putting this off any longer. He stares at the report guidelines. He picks up a pencil and taps it on his notebook. He loves the desert. Why can't he get started on this report? Frustrated, he looks around the room until his gaze comes to rest on a book about amphibians he brought home from the school library. He picks it up and starts leafing through it. He glances over at the terrarium. The toad is crouched in the corner. It doesn't look happy. 4 glass walls and some dirt and plants don't make much of a home for something that's used to living outside in the wild. He skims through the section of the book on building a terrarium for amphibians, looking for ideas. Just then the doorbell rings. "I'll get it," he yells, slamming the book shut. He runs down the hallway to the front door, happy for an excuse to escape his homework. He opens the door and finds his sister, Agatha, standing there. Ryan is just behind her, holding a book in his hands. "The door was locked, you bozo," Agatha says and shoves past him. "It was not. Try turning the knob for once." Ben turns back to Ryan. "Hi," he says. "Hi," Ryan says. "Mom and Roy are waiting in the car, so I can't stay. I brought your book back, and when I was at the library, I found these books about amphibians and reptiles, too. I thought you might want to see them." He's so excited he practically throws the books at Ben, and they fall to the floor between them. "Whoops," he says, and scrambles to pick them up. "I took them out on my library card, and my mom said we could bring them over. You can give them back to me when you're done." Ben helps Ryan with the books, and Ryan just keeps on talking. "They're not as cool as your book. Your book is the best. I've read some of the chapters twice already," and Ryan's mother honks the horn and waves for Ryan to hurry. I'm going to pause for just a minute here, and I want you to think about, why do you think Ryan brought Ben books from the library? How does his behavior relate to the theme of the story? We know that Ryan has made an effort to be Ben's friend, although Ben has not been real receptive. I think Ryan is being friendly again by knowing Ben enjoys books about amphibians. I remember in chapter 8, Ryan observed Ben with his own book on amphibians in class. That is a trait of a friend, recognizing the interests of someone else. "Sorry, gotta go." "Thanks," Ben says. Ryan smiles his loopy smile. "See you tomorrow," he says. On his way to the car, he turns back and calls out, "Oh yeah, I put a picture I drew in one of the books. It's for you." "Okay," Ben says. He waves goodbye as Ryan's mom backs the car out of the driveway. Ben looks down at the stack of books in his arms. Still standing in the doorway with the door open, he opens the top book. Between the first 2 pages is a colored pencil drawing. It's beautiful, much better than anything Ben's ever done. He didn't even know Ryan could draw. It's a picture of a bright orange creature perched on a rock by a stream. Above it, Ryan has written in large block letters, "Golden toad, endangered or extinct, handle with care." Underneath the picture of the toad, Ryan has written an inscription, "For Ben, your friend Ryan." Ben's embarrassed. He hasn't done anything to deserve Ryan's friendship. He's barely even talked to him. He takes the books to his room. He searches through his desk drawer for the tape dispenser and sticks Ryan's picture on the wall above his desk. Then he sits at the desk and looks at the library books Ryan brought. He opens the biggest book first, the one with the glossy color photograph of a bright red frog on the cover. He thumbs through, looking at all the different species of frogs and toads. Then he stops on a page and stares at the photograph of a small, smooth-skinned, olive-green toad. 2 yellow stripes curve across its back. Its eyes are bright, the edges of the eyes are golden, and the pupils are vertical, up and down, not horizontal like other toads. A diagram shows the projections of the hind feet, and they look like little shovels. He reads the caption, "Eastern spadefoot, now rare and endangered in several states." It's the toad Mrs. Tibbets told him about, the kind that appears every year in the vernal pool. Compared to some of the other species in this book, it doesn't look like much, but Mrs. Tibbets has made it sound like a treasure, like a special secret that only the two of them know about. An endangered species right around the corner from where he lives. Ben thinks about the toads out there, buried way under the ground, waiting for the rain. He'd love to see them when they come out for that one night, but that would mean talking to Mrs. Tibbets, and that's something he can't imagine doing, not after what happened with the snakes. His guilt sits in the pit of his stomach like a big cold stone. He reads all there is about the spadefoot, and it only makes him feel worse. "Ben," his mother calls, "it's time for dinner." He looks at the spadefoot one more time and closes the book. He'll have to work on his report later. I've been thinking, Ben is supposed to be studying and finishing his project. Instead, he keeps studying the books on amphibians. I wonder if Ben should have asked to change his report from the Sonoran Desert to another ecosystem. Do you know which one I'm thinking of? Why? All right, fifth graders, you will need to review Chapter 9. I have the pages in the slideshow, or you may go to ReadyGen and read on your own or use the online audio reader. After you have finished reading, you will complete the character analysis chart for Chapter 9. Each event indicates a character's response to a challenge. We completed the chart for Chapter 8, and you may use it as an example to continue and complete Chapter 9. So here is your chart. I know you can do this. You've got the power. I'll see you next time.